What's going on, fantasy people? You are back with the boys from the True North Fantasy Pod. Ty and Trav here with another one of our news and notes check-in videos. We did the first one last week, and that was a lot of fun. So we are back for another, and we hope you enjoyed the first one. Ty, how you doing tonight, my man?
Doing good. NHL draft was tonight. That was exciting. A real controversial pick to finish it out too. So good stuff. Yeah. But unfortunately, another emergency podcast with another big piece of news here.
Yeah, just a few players that we're going to talk about on the news and notes to kind of stuff tonight. A lot of big stuff just this morning. Obviously, Cam Akers shook the world a couple days ago. And now we have Michael Thomas news, but we're going to get to that. I'm actually going to open us up with a couple of tidbits out of New York, Ty. First, we are opening training camps with Saquon. Yeah, some housekeeping. First, we've got Saquon Barkley is going to open training camp on the PUP list. And we have Kadarius Toney, who is actually on the COVID list. So definitely opposite ends of the spectrum for where those players are at in their respective careers. But what do you think about Saquon starting on the PUP? Do you think he's actually going to miss any time for the season? Do you think he can perform at a high level without that preseason play? When do you think he gets in there?
No, I have Saquon ready to be suiting up for week one there. I think the only question with Saquon is where do you want to draft him, right? Because if people want to take Derrick Henry over him, I might understand them doing so. If you want to take Dalvin Cook, I'm definitely on that side of the fence as well. Mm-hmm. Aaron Jones, maybe. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't go that far, but I think there's players that you can debate between Saquon Barkley this year with so many weapons and maybe the possibility that they limit his touches a little bit. But I think it's a lot different once the lights are on and the pressure is on. And Saquon Barkley, at the end of the day, is probably their best player on offense. And he is in a contract year, I think, right? Like, I think they can exercise his fifth-year option. Not sure if they'll want to do that. Like, they might have to sign him to an extension this off season. So definitely interested to watch Saquon, and hopefully he can have a full, healthy season because we know he'll probably deliver a top 5 running back season for fantasy owners if he does.
Yeah, it's just like the upside is so there. And I think kind of like you said, Zeke is probably the last of that tier of running backs that I would be debating over Saquon. And I think that's where you're seeing Saquon go at like 6 in some drafts where you can get him. So he is becoming a value based on what he could give you for that full season. But the question is whether he's going to last for that full season. So they obviously brought in Devin Booker, who's going to be kind of a running mate, but probably doesn't take too much of the workload there. Just insurance, I guess. But going to be fun to see Saquon back on the field though, because he does make a lot of big plays, and I wouldn't be hesitating to take him in that mid first round. Even I would take him potentially over Derrick Henry. Yeah, I think I've got him ahead in my ranks because of the pass catching. But debates to be had where there wasn't really before, right?
And it's that nice tier. And just for Kadarius Toney really quick, this certainly puts him behind the 8 ball, right? And it feels like this couldn't have come at a worse time just because there was steam building behind him. I've seen him really creep up in drafts. We could get him next to Free and even our best ball 10s a month ago, and now he's going in the teens. So I think we definitely have to pump the brakes on Kadarius Toney. I think this is good news for somebody like Evan Ingram, and even thinking about Saquon Barkley and his target share. So I definitely worry about Kadarius Toney, who we already worried about what his snap share might look like in year one in this Jason Garrett offense that doesn't use a lot of pre-snap motion and throw a lot of screen passes and stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of where he would be wonderful, obviously. And I think kind of contrary to Saquon, who has so much stature in the ranks of running backs and with the team, that he's going to be getting, that full workload, probably not that limited when he comes back. Whereas Kadarius Toney doesn't have any stature really amongst that depth chart where they just added Kenny Golladay, and they've got Slayton and Shepard as well. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Kadarius Toney to, I think, be relevant for us this year in fantasy. So we kind of keep a watch on that, but I wouldn't be looking at him in redraft this year. That's for sure.
The next guy I have here with your Birds shirt on there, I wanted to ask you about Zach Ertz, because people were talking like, Zach Ertz is back. He's back. But Then SB Nation, Sports Illustrated, some people started reporting hold the brakes, pump the brakes. So do you think he gets traded or released, or do you think Zach Ertz is back with the team?
I think he's going to be back. I think it's just they're not going to get, like, I don't think Howie is going to take that 5th, 6th round pick for Zach Ertz. I think he wants more than that, which is just kind of not really what teams are going to give up for him at this stage in the game, or else they would have done so already. So I think he's going to end up being back, and he's going to be a bit of a thorn in the side of all of the targets for these guys.
I totally, like, 100%. I think it hurts like all the pieces in this offense. I moved Dallas Goedert down when I heard the news.
100%.
I already have very little Dallas G like in best ball drafts, but I moved Noah Fant ahead of him recently. I just think this offense under Jalen Hurts, that's kind of the problem, right? Like Hurts really only started 3 full real games last year, weeks 14 to 16, fantasy football playoffs, coincidentally. And about half his targets went to the wide receiver position, just 15%, just 5 targets per game went to the running backs in Hurts' 3 big starts. 34% of the targets went to the tight end position, 3rd highest in the NFL over that span, which sounds all well and good, but if Zach Ertz is back, it sucks because those two split that market share right down the middle. Dallas Goedert had 17 targets during Hurts' 3 starts. Ertz had 17 targets, and Goedert caught 11 of his targets, but and Ertz only caught 7. But Ertz averaged over 15 yards per reception on his 7 catches. Goedert was under 11 yards per reception, and now you introduce Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor heading into year 2, who actually led the Eagles in those three games. And I just think the tight end market share might shrink a little bit, and I'm not sure if Dallas Goedert if it was to swing in his direction even more. I'm not sure if it would even swing to the levels of like a 20% share of the targets. And then, what is 20% of this passing game even worth? So there's so many questions that I'm fading almost all of these weapons in the pass game, including Devontae Smith at cost. I probably, if I want a piece, I'm going after Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I might even dip my toes in a little bit of Miles Sanders, even regardless of that lower running back target share. But I think that's so well put, because Zach Ertz has previously been a big red zone target before, which is where we want Dallas Goedert to succeed. Obviously, Dallas Goedert's going to do better work after the catch. And I think in a full season, we probably see a little bit of a different split than that 50-50 split that you were talking about there. Because if you look, I think it wasn't even really like a high scoring split either. Dallas Goedert, I think in those games averaged like 8 points or something like that, not even 7 points per game.
Yeah, like neither of them scored a touchdown.
It was like 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if Ertz has taken 4 of those points per game from a low tight end scoring team, all of a sudden, that's a big portion of Goddard's potential points there. So it's not looking very good for those guys being fantasy relevant. But I think, it's not, we didn't really expect them to be world beaters, right? So we just kind of come off of them, whereas like Jalen Reagor wasn't costing you much. So if you did invest earlier, it wasn't too bad. Devontae Smith in Dynasty, I think, should be fine. But yeah, it's the Zach Ertz stuff. I don't know. I don't get it. I think you should just get him out of there.
Yeah, totally. And that's why they might have to retain his salary to do that, or cut him out, right? So let's go to my guys.
Ertz, man.
Yeah. Like he just doesn't give you that like spiked week potential. That's why we're not even really talking about him as a late round option at the tight end position at this point, especially if he's back in Philly. Like him being back in Philly would also kind of kill Zach Ertz's possibility of being fantasy viable this season, I think. Speaking of which, Big Ben is somebody that, we're not sure how fantasy viable he's going to be. He did come in, in shape, Trav. What do you think? What do you think about Big Ben? Did him coming into camp in shape move the needle at all for you? Because he seems like a very boring pick in fantasy drafts right now.
It honestly was kind of encouraging. You know what I mean? It shows that he will kind of wants it. He realizes that he doesn't have a whole lot of time left. And like we talked about it a little bit, I think a couple of days ago before the show that we recorded, and you were just saying that he can weight cut like that. You know what I mean? Drop 20 pounds or whatever, whenever he needs to.
Christian
he had quite a bit extra hanging around. I will say that. And it just, his style of play was always to kind of be a little bit escapable out of the pocket. Like he wasn't running away from guys necessarily, but he could kind of move around back there. And I think he needs some of that back, as well as just, you know, the will to kind of take this offense to where it needs to be, because it just hasn't really seemed like it's been there the last couple of years. And I can't put anything tangible on that necessarily, but it just seems a little bit off. You know what I mean? And I hope that this means that he's just kind of puts it all back in, because the tools are there, man. This team is like Super Bowl ready.
Yeah, well, you know, I could be here all night talking about how we shouldn't rely on old Big Ben coming back. I mean, those days are definitely done. The Antonio
sure.
Brown, and I know you weren't saying that. I just, for our listeners, for sure, because the Big Ben hype could always get out of hand, and this happens almost every year where we're all like, oh my God, you see that picture of Big Ben, and then, you know, he comes into camp looking all right. Because what we want to see is the identity on offense, right? We've talked actually all day about the rushing stuff, so I don't even want to talk about that, but the play action is something that we should really follow in training camp with Big Ben. It's just, you know, the hottest thing out there right now is play action. Last year, we've seen the attempts actually go up in the last 4 years straight in play action attempts, play action completion, percentage, passing yards off play action, and touchdown passes off play action just exploded in 2020, according to PFF. The Steelers have 523 passing yards off play action in the last 2 seasons combined. Every other football team has at least more play action passing yards in each of the last 2 seasons than the Steelers have in the last 2 seasons combined. So it is really frustrating, because Matt Canada comes in and his offense is famous for a lot of pre-snap motion and play action. And that's where I'm expecting a lot of chunk yards to come, because if they aren't going to come off play action, I have no idea where those chunk yards are going to come from. So do you worry about the weapons in this passing game, knowing that we are going to see a run heavy offense and they are all still going top 30 in average draft position?
Yeah, like it's not like a 10 out of 10 worry necessarily, because I still think there is going to be volume there to keep some of these guys afloat. Like I see Chase Claypool has been rising. I don't know how that's fluctuated within the last like couple weeks or whatever, but I think he has a really wide range of outcomes in this offense. I think Juju and Deontay are going to have the heavy target volume, just maybe with a little bit lower upside, unless we get that average depth of target up and we get some of this excitement up. So I have a little bit of concern, but I'm also like optimistic towards what the new coordinator can bring. So I'm still investing, but I'm just trying to get them at like a smidgen of a discount as opposed to the high end of what they could give me, you know?
Yeah, totally. Because we still have to bake in that touchdown regression for Big Ben as well, I think. He threw about 1,300 less yards in 2020 than he did in 2018, but just one fewer touchdown pass. So I worry about that. I put Big Ben, like I moved him up a little bit just because I really had almost none of them, but I only moved him ahead of Zach Wilson. I also moved him ahead of Saints quarterbacks, which we might get to. And I still have him ahead of Derek Carr, just for fun.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Nuke Hopkins? Because I want to get to Michael Thomas really bad. Do you like Nuke Hopkins? Any worry about him reporting?
No. I think he's going to be there. He'll figure it out. Like he makes a lot of cheddar, so he's not going to mess that up, I don't think.
And that's the key thing to mention, is that he would owe a lot of cheddar if he decided not to report. So I don't think there's any worries about Nuke Hopkins, just worrying about that diva mentality a little bit. Like he's going to have to follow much more rigorous protocols if he decides not to get vaccinated. And in which case he better not think that he's above those rules, because he's going to have to follow them, and we have to follow that. Unfortunately, speaking of unfortunate, Michael Thomas, that news was unfortunate. It's the same ankle injury that he dealt with a year ago. So sources, blah, blah, blah. Ian Rappaport reported Michael Thomas is expected to miss the start of the 2021 season after undergoing surgery to repair the ligaments in his ankle in June. Based on the timing, the surgery recommended about 4 months of recovery. So he could be sidelined for what, the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the regular season there. And I mentioned this is the same injury he dealt with last year that he ended up on the IR on. Believe during fantasy championship week, he would not have had Michael Thomas. But he was back in there for the playoffs. He had a good game against Chicago, really bad game against the Bucks. And it was like his worst season when he dealt with that ankle injury, career lows in receptions and receiving yards per game. So what do you think the story is with this injury? Do you think it's something that he's going to have to deal with all season long? Or do you think this is the last surgery, he gets better, and he's back to Michael Thomas?
I think it could be something that lingers, right? Like Slant Boy needs his ankles, man. And he's going to need to be cutting and being that number one receiver for this team. They're going to need to lean on him heavily. Taysom Hill, he has previously leaned on him. And I think Jameis Winston would be ridiculous not to lean on him the way he leaned on, say, Mike Evans. Obviously, a different role, but like just as the number one target in Tampa, he's going to want that as well out of Michael Thomas. And I mean, you don't want a busted wheel if he's going to have to be that for his team. So it really depends on when they bring him back, right? Because that depth chart looks starving for a wideout, and we don't want to see them bring him back too early, because then I would say it's definitely going to be lingering all season long. So if I'm a Michael Thomas, if I've got him on my roster, I'm definitely pretty worried about that. And, all those teams that have just recently drafted him are probably, down in the dumps, much like the Cam Akers teams as well. So I think he can come back and be good. I just think they need to let him sit out the full amount of time that he needs.
Well, so 3-4 weeks, whatever, that's the timetable clinically or whatever that we're hearing from the most trusted sources. So even if we exercise a little bit of caution, I'm kind of focused in on that week 6 bye for New Orleans. That is when their bye week is. So, if we get him for 10 weeks this season, that's definitely interesting to me. But I think they'll be coming off that bye week 7. That's probably the most realistic expectations. But you mentioned Jameis Winston would like that number one option. What I think this really does is call into question who they go to at quarterback. Yeah. Like it almost makes more sense all of a sudden for them to go with Taysom Hill. Like I don't want to sound reactionary, but I've almost switched overnight from Jameis is going to be the week 1 starter to Taysom Hill now.
Yeah, I think, I actually thought that it was going to be Taysom Hill starting the season, at least for a few games, and then potentially not doing that great in the passing department, then bringing Jameis in. So I think I'm right there with you that it kind of solidifies Taysom as the guy who's going to be there, because their avenue for winning, like who's Jameis Winston going to throw to if he's going to be the guy airing it out? Jameis Winston doesn't offer that element of rushing that Taysom Hill adds, because Sean Payton wants some tools to play with, and no Michael Thomas is a major tool out of your tool belt. And so adding that rushing quarterback is putting one back in there, right? So
that was line, and
that was well
kind of
said.
Makes sense all of a sudden.
It's going to be Taysom, and they can still win games. It's not necessarily going to be pretty. It'll be pretty for the fantasy running backs. You put out a really good tweet that's just a simple little chart of how the Saints have finished. And I think you mentioned it on our last show as well, that the Saints have just finished, I think it's like the top 7 out of the last 8 years or something crazy like that, as far as rushing fantasy
Saints running backs.
Yeah, Saints running backs. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, they've scored the first or second most fantasy points by the running back position in 9 of the last 10 years. And the Saints, 33.8 PPR points per game last year by running backs. During the quarterback carousel year, we were worried about quarterback play. That was the most fantasy points scored by any running back position in all of football last year. So there's not a lot of worries there. And I think Latavius Murray is somebody that is going to not get a lot of buzz that should. I saw Scott Barrett tweeted out the best graded PFF running backs in 2020 today. And Latavius Murray was on that list. I thought that was kind of interesting, just in case people are like, well, he's too old. Well, he ain't, apparently. And just go back to Michael Thomas, because I definitely have a little bit of a hot take on him. Like, he's off my board in best balls. I concede that. But if I'm getting this guy for 10 weeks, he'll smash ADP in home leagues, I think. So I still have him as my wide receiver 41, even in redraft rankings. I'd take MT as soon as we start kind of sniffing the double-digit rounds of a home league. And if any of, it doesn't even have to be a home league. As long as that league has IR spots, I want Michael Thomas on my roster, I think. I'll also have 3 or 4 wide receivers on my team already, just the way I draft. By the time I have to select Michael Thomas. So I still don't mind MT, and I think he's going to be off of a lot of people's draft boards.
Yeah, that new price is going to be really nice on Michael Thomas for sure. So I'm right there with you. I think like double digit rounds might be a little bit sketchy depending on what the reports are coming through training camp, because if it is looking more like that 4-week time frame, then I think people might start sniffing around a little bit more as you get into like maybe the 7th or 8th round. But it's yeah, you can never really tell with those guys that come in injured, but I tend to be a little bit off those kind of guys as well, but Michael Thomas is just too good to pass up when he gets that deep into a draft.
And just one more thought that I've heard tossed around a lot is that Alvin Kamara actually moves down, because if Taysom Hill is the quarterback, then Alvin Kamara's ceiling is called into question, because yeah, he has the volume. He's the best player and only guy you can really run the offense through, but this offense could also be extremely transparent, right? That's one of the other negative byproducts of Taysom Hill leading this offense, is how boring and slow we know it's going to be. The play volume and efficiency definitely could see a downtick, right? So do you have any worries about Alvin Kamara because of how high you have to take him?
No, because I think he's so good. He is just so good. And I think one of my worries with Taysom was that Alvin Kamara might not get that many targets in comparison to previous seasons with Taysom Hill at the helm. I think Michael Thomas going down obviously moves Alvin Kamara up to the top of that totem pole for them, as well as the fact that I think Sean Payton will find ways to try and keep the defense honest, where like Taysom Hill obviously likes to get out. We saw him throw a bunch of deep balls last year. He had 3 games last year over 20 pass attempts, and he was over 75% completion in all of those games, 2 of which I believe were over 300. So he can throw the ball if he's put into that situation. I think they would try and scale that back as much as they could, but if they have to do it to try and keep a defense honest and keep Alvin Kamara getting some of that space, I think they're going to be able to do that because they've got some speed there. They're obviously going to add, we love Tre'Quan Smith. Marquez Callaway's got some speed as well. So I think they've got some tools to do that from time to time, but maybe just not as often as they would have done with Michael Thomas. Kind of keeping it open for the other guys.
And just because you mentioned him, that's the one guy I think is a big winner, especially in dynasty circles, to watch, because I think he'll be their possession wide receiver, their third down guy that they look to, and that's Marquez Callaway. And I know Jimbo will appreciate that one as well. But yeah, Marquez Callaway, somebody that the team likes, and he's the only one who has like kind of prototypical size and can be that possession guy, I think, for the team. So he definitely wins. I think Tre'Quan Smith loses big time if it's Taysom Hill at quarterback, which is really frustrating. And then Adam Trautman is somebody that continues to move up boards.
Yeah, I think with Michael Thomas out, Adam Trautman, like we are going to have to see the red zone chops from Adam Trautman early in the season, because Michael Thomas has previously gotten a lot of red zone work. It's Trautman is the only size guy that they're going to have there to kind of post up those guys. So I think he's going to have to prove it early in the season. And I think that's just kind of good, right? Because you want them to unleash him, and they might just have to now.
Agreed.
Yeah, man. I think that's all she wrote for this one. Ty, what do you think?
Agreed.
I love it. Well, it was a pleasure getting together again on another one of these short ones. Hopefully everybody enjoyed. Hopefully everybody makes sure to check out the previous and the next episode of the True North Fantasy Pod, because we will be on there. We are, of course, a part of the Fantasy Points Media Group, where at fantasypoints.com, you can use our promo code 21TrueNorth10 to get 10% off. Dynamite analysis, incredible analysts, like really good dudes, as well as really smart dudes, as really well thought out takes, very diverse skill sets to get you prepped for whatever league you're doing. Fantasypoints.com has got it. So 21 True North 10 there. Really appreciative of being part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. But Ty, I think with that, I'm going to say until the next episode, hope everyone has a good evening. Peace.